This conference will now be recorded.
All right, now you're up. Thanks.
Great. So first, I just want to say thank you for everyone for taking the time to attend today's session. And if you could attend all the ones this week, that's amazing and great. The goal is for us to have a discussion and to hear feedback and to get ideas and for us to pass along information there. If you have anything that comes up, think of it later. Feel free to reach out to myself. I think the contact end of the slide of the College Outreach COI members. So we'd be very happy to hear your feedback and suggestions for any other topics. Hopefully we will continue to be able to do these sessions in some format, in person or virtual, in future years. So if you have suggestions for topics for the next time we do this, those are always welcome. Please send them my way. So without further ado, I think let's get started and start chatting. So Eddie, I'll start the first few slides.
Great, thanks, Ann. Yes, just to confirm with everybody, especially those that weren't at PLW last year, this has been approved as an annual meeting that we would have. Ideally, next year we will have it at PLW again as part of the, a meeting within the meeting where we will have budget to bring all the student chapter mentors, and then depending on the program, we would support a handful of invited guests to help support the program. This year, because of it being virtual, we were able to expand the audience to include our entire student membership, all the post student chapter mentors, as well as the college outreach community of interest. So I'm really happy to see 31 of us on this call. Thanks, everyone. Just a quick recap, we've got about 55 minutes to have some discussion. We have 4 moderators that are going to be taking different parts of the discussions. Some of it is really just for them to also hear what you have to say, and then they'll take it back to the leadership team for us to do some follow-up debriefing on what we've heard. A lot of this is going to support and frame our work plan for the coming year as a community of interest. So Tiffany Castricone, Andrew Bates, and Christina Jettie, and Andra Clapsaddle all have various different roles within the college outreach community of interest, and they'll be helping us steer some of the conversations. There we go. Objectives. We really want to have a discussion today. This is our first of 3 sessions. Today's theme is student engagement. I was mentioning earlier, we invited about 3,000 students to this event. We've got Joseph representing the San Antonio chapter. I'm not sure if we have other students on the call because I don't recognize everybody's name necessarily. But we're definitely not anywhere near 3,000 student participants at this. So some of what we're trying to get back into today is what are some of the barriers that you all know of that might be keeping students from engaging with us? What do we need to be considering both as a community of interest, but also as the interactions that go on at the post level that we need to be supporting from the national office. We want to record your feedback as in response to the questions that we have prompts for. Make note of any best practices that you're finding work really well for you. Those are the kind of things we want to start capturing, and then take everything that's come up today and the next 2 days and be able to report back to the membership as a community of interest that represents that resource for the society. To start, what's framing this discussion is really, we have an entire goal of the strategic plan, 1 out of 5, that's devoted to what the college outreach community of interest has responsibility for, and that's to lead efforts to inspire, encourage, and enable youth to pursue STEM careers. There's a lot of depth to that statement between what's happening at the post, what's happening at universities and colleges and trade schools, but also within the schools where we have student chapters. So all of that, the work, those efforts help support this goal in support of the strategic plan. A little context before we kick off the discussions. We currently have 2,000 collegiate level students in our database and 388 high school students. Our high school students should be higher. We're still, one of the challenges we have at the national office is our membership database and how it accounts for student members. Because they're not a paid member, they really weren't worked into the infrastructure the way professional members were. So for the last 2 years, I've been backtracking, trying to get our student members to be better represented just within our database. We have some formulas where campers get converted to student members and those add to our high school numbers, but that hasn't happened year to year, so we're still doing some backtracking there. So these numbers should really be a lot higher given the number of STEM students that are out there, especially those that might be connected to a university that's close to a post. So this just gives us a sense of targets that we, a baseline for what we want to be doing in recruiting more student members. Of the 2,400 approximately, only 1,800 are associated with a post. That means that we don't know necessarily why some of the other students came to us. Again, some of that is just needing to clean up the database and get more accurate data on students when they join. 624 of them are also associated with a student chapter. We know that we're not capturing every student that's affiliated with a student chapter, and that's another cleanup exercise that we would need to do. But right now, 597 have no post or no student chapter affiliation. So outside of the national office, there's no other entity that would be aware of within the college outreach structure that would be engaging them in any sort of messaging or opportunities to participate in the society. And then the other statistic is, we have over 500 different institutions represented with this level. These are places that are producing more STEM degreed individuals. These are the places that are the feeders for the young professional level members that would come into SAME. And right now it's an untapped resource of engaging these institutions. What are they doing? How can we help? Where can we have a role in steering them towards degrees that help our mission as an organization? Any questions so far? All right, and if you could help me monitor the chat, actually, I just realized. Everybody feel free to throw in questions in the chat as well as we're going through these slides. So I mentioned one of the things that we haven't done a good job on, and something that I'm trying to bring more focus to, is the member part of student member, not just the student piece. I think because of the fact that they're students, these members tend to be seen in a more emerging capacity than full-fledged professionals. And I think with the students that I've been able to interact with, when you think about the way that they think, the research projects that they're engaging in, the academic work that they're pursuing, there's a missed resource here on the technical side of not engaging them more fully in the work of the society. At Jettie in Tampa, we had a group of students from George Mason that presented on a new carbon fiber technology that they were working on that had the potential to be used to create better sensors for dangerous chemicals for service members in the field. That's on par with research that any private sector company might be doing, and we really need to take more advantage of integrating them into the membership more fully. In addition to that, internships is something we've struggled to get off the ground, but trying to encourage our sustaining members to see our student members as an asset, where rather than going out to an open community, how can we get them to see our 2,000 college students as a prime recruitment community? The virtual student student chapters and the virtual student chapter add more depth to our ability to engage students, and you'll hear a little bit more from Andra Clapsaddle on the virtual student chapter later. Scholarships, we have a new scholarship advisory group that's looking at revamping our scholarship guidelines to really encompass all the different ways that posts are giving out scholarship funds, and then really connecting the dots between scholarships being an investment in future STEM professionals, and then what are the posts doing to continue to make connections with those scholarship recipients so that we don't lose any return on those investments. Mentoring is another aspect that students could tap into. We have a mentoring advisory group under the leader development community of interests. And I apologize for going so fast, but yeah, we can follow up on any of this if you need. But the goal here is to, obviously encourage more mentoring across the society, and students are a prime community that would benefit from mentoring. We do have an LDP group, the Leader Development Program. As part of their projects, 2 people have indicated to me that they would like to work on a mentoring set of best practices at the post level, one of which would focus on student mentoring. So there'll be resources that we'll be able to bring to the table to help posts do more student mentoring. Education and training, folks don't realize that registration to all our national events is free for student members. Posts just really need to work on getting the students there at the very minimum. Wherever we have an event, once we're back to physically locating events, we should be organizing groups of students from the surrounding drivable area to make sure that they're taking advantage of that. We need to figure out how to host them at our national events so that they have a more managed experience. And that's something we do have a vice chair of conferences within the leadership team that we're looking to develop that, to help, or a vice chair of events, excuse me, that we're still recruiting for to address that. The communities of interest, again, on the member side of student membership, there's no reason why students couldn't be involved in our technical COIs, coming up with webinar ideas, the programmatic COIs, helping us shape the college outreach COI, our STEM outreach, but for some reason they're just not making that link. And then of course, they all have access to TME magazine. Keep losing my place here, there we go. So those are kind of the upfront slides I was hoping to go to, and now this is meant to be interactive. So we've got some question prompts that we hope to get feedback for. You can either throw feedback into the chat or unmute your line, and feel free to provide some voice feedback. But from here, I'll turn it over to Andra Clapsaddle, who's chair of the virtual student chapter, to kick us off with some of our discussions.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. So so the virtual student chapter was created about 2 years ago with the intent of reaching all of those students that we have out there that are not affiliated with a student chapter. So, and you just saw the numbers, so you know that that's a lot of potential students that we could be reaching. So one of the things that we've, and as Eddie said, we've just really been having trouble figuring out the best way to get the word out on the different webinars that we've been hosting, which is the focus of what that chapter does. We try and host virtual webinars 3 to 6 times a year, depending on what we can come up with. And to date, it's been pretty minimal on the attendance that we get at these virtual student chapter webinars. So those webinars are available for everybody, so they can benefit the physical student chapters, as mentioned on this slide, and student members at large. So, I mean, they're available for everybody, but the focus again is for the virtual student chapters. So I feel like once we get the webinars and get participation in that, we can actually take it to another level and actually start to do more engagement, typical with what an actual student, physical student chapter would be doing. So does anybody have any questions or have any insight or thoughts on any of these questions on this slide?
I just want to add, Andra, that we did confirm our next webinar is going to be on the Space Force. So we're hoping that those kinds of things, we're playing chicken and the egg. We need things that are of interest and really captivate the students to get them to come on, and then we can get into a pattern of communicating to them. So that's one at least that we have that we're teeing up to, that'll hopefully resonate with our student audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we recently had one just a few weeks ago, and it was actually on what is life going to be like going back to college this fall with COVID. So we had 3 great presenters and fairly good attendance for that webinar compared to what we've seen in the past. But it was still only roughly 40 people that had signed into that webinar. So there's a lot more that I hope we can do to increase that outreach.
Hey Eddie, this is Dave Packard, and I appreciate the information about the virtual chapters. I think the challenge for us as a post is is kind of tracking who might be a member of a virtual student chapter. We do have folks from our post who are attending a variety of schools. In fact, we have many scholarship recipients who are scattered to the wind, that are farther away from our post. And so the challenge is, for example, I mentor one scholarship recipient who's attending Notre Dame. Well, of course, Notre Dame is far away from our post, and while there may be a post that serves Notre Dame or other schools that are far flung, it's hard for us to support, I guess, if you will, a student who we might not know is associated with a student at a virtual location. So, I don't know, Andra, if you have any suggestions about that, how a post can be informed of virtual student chapters and
Right.
who the members are.
Well, that actually brings up a good point, because there is, the opportunity to join the virtual student chapter on the SAME.org site, which is another thing that there's not been a lot of folks joining that. So the numbers are pretty low on there. I think for students, we have a lot from West Point actually. So, but other than that, there's not a lot of students out there. So I don't know if we're missing getting the message out on how to join the virtual student chapter, or if it's just too, well, it's not complicated, I don't think, but having to log on to the website and things like that might be, I don't know, is it, how do we make that simpler for them to engage and actually get onto the virtual student chapter roster so that we can then do the outreach. One thing we'll also talk about here in another slide was a platform that we tried to set up initially for the program was using Slack to try and reach everybody. And again, that was just a miss because we just couldn't get the people to register and actually use the platform. So that visibility is definitely missing for all of us, I think.
I really think the effort, and Bobby Joe has chimed in here, but if you look at the chat, but I really think the real heavy lifting comes from the post, the local post, and I, again, trying to set up those lines of communication, maybe with the COI, I'm not sure, but I think that is a challenge that we all face. You got to have that connection to those students, but the only way that I know to do it is to have that connection, that line of communication through the post. So anyway, just some thoughts.
Hey, Mike Scarano here with a quick comment. I think we're going to touch upon some of this tomorrow in our Wednesday session, but you all mentioned that West Point is one of the exceptions, and coincidentally happens to be our student post out of the New York City post. And I think you just mentioned it, a critical piece of succeeding here is having that ongoing communications connection between the student post, the local chapter, the student post, the local post, and the National Society. And I know we've got a very, very aggressive, very proactive communications loop going on. And I don't want to give away tomorrow's program, but we're going to talk more about exactly how we are configured in New York City and what we do relative to the West Point Post that hopefully might be able to be copied and used elsewhere.
Yeah, let me back. Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
just real quick. Just, I mean, so that's good, this discussion, but it doesn't really reach the students that aren't affiliated with a post or with a student chapter, right? Because you've got a strong student chapter, let's say at West Point, and a strong post that it's affiliated with, but there are a lot of other students out there that don't have that background. So, and those are really, I think, the ones, you know, that we need to figure out how to reach, because we can go through the post and the discussion tomorrow will highlight that, I believe. And but you know, how do we reach the others?
Well, let me throw a suggestion. Would it help going through the database of the virtual student members, determining where physically they are, and then matching them up with the nearest local post, and perhaps creating that that relationship that doesn't exist in those cases?
Yeah, let me backtrack a little on the database side of the virtual student chapter, because I do think we need to, and I'll need to regroup with Andra a little more in depth on this aspect of it, because the way it was originally envisioned, it was a entity that students would sign up for, and then they would belong to the virtual student chapter. But that virtual student chapter is open to anybody. So we have, you know, just professional parts of the society that also belong because they were interested in the effort, they wanted to support it and get on board. But the reality is, whenever we do a webinar, the webinar goes to the virtual student chapter list, but it goes to all the students as well. So every student member, whether high school or college, will get a notice about a potential webinar. So I see the virtual student chapter less as a convening body with an insular community, and more as a public forum type body that puts professional development, technical presentations together and makes it available to the whole community. You know, so that we would be the group that people would turn to if you needed a national level presentation on something. You know, I talked to a couple of the student chapters on trying to get them to come up with technical presentations that they would bring to the virtual student chapter, and we would host it as a national event. You know, if, say, like for the example with that carbon fiber, if for some reason that had broader appeal, the George Mason group could have arranged a webinar promoted through the virtual student chapter that would be publicized to all our student members. And that's the vehicle that we're using, is the virtual student chapter. That's the very base layer of engagement right now. But we have talked about, once we get into competitions, how can the virtual student chapter be the host of a virtual team when there isn't a physical student chapter to organize a team? So there's more we can do with them, but right now the reality is every event that the virtual student chapter puts on goes out to every student member, whether they're enrolled in the virtual student chapter or not. So I'm not seeing the need as much to get people on board virtual student chapter. More, I see the need for virtual student chapter to communicate out to our student members.
Yeah, other than you know, broadening it like that kind of goes away from what the original definition of the virtual student chapter was, right? Because we were thinking that we were only going to be outreaching to that group that needed a chapter or a connection to a post. But you know, to this point, we've just expanded it really. If we're sending it to all student members, so, and that's not a problem, because I think that helps us with our initial situation and problem here of actually reaching people and engaging with them. So that's the first step that we have to conquer, and then we can start to work on, I think, is there more we can do with the virtual student chapter itself?
Yeah, and Christina just put a note here about, you know, if the webinar notices are going to student members, they should also go to advisors and the outreach chairs from the post. Believe it or not, I just on Friday, I got the list, or we updated our database so that it now has all the faculty advisors, all the chapter mentors, all the chapter presidents, student presidents recorded. Before, that wasn't a list that I was able to get. So those are the things that, as we clean up the database, I do have more data to access. And so, yeah, future, like the Space Force one, it will go to not just the student members, but the infrastructure within SAME that supports them at the post level, at the COI level, and at the student chapter level. That's
Eddie,
the
will
idea.
that include the post secretaries?
Not automatically. I would need, so I would definitely need assistance in at any time we have a communication to go out, telling me who it needs to be included, because everyone is a different list and I got to send to those lists separately.
Right. I only suggest that because as a post secretary, I can tell you that many of the secretaries are in the middle of many different groups, and they can make sure that the right people get the right communication, or, you know, provide that little added oomph or emphasis to help people say, oh yeah, I better go to this. You know, we're all buried in email every day, and having some way of putting that red rose on a particular event or email might be something that helps increase the attendance.
This is Ann McMillan. One thing I would also like to add and just ask everybody on the call to do is, if you aren't already a member of the College Outreach COI on your SAME membership, please add the College Outreach COI, and then you'll also get all of the virtual student chapter information through the College Outreach COI as well. So it's been easier, makes it a little easier to keep track of what's going on.
Yeah, now, Mike, with the post secretaries question, one of the other things that I haven't seen a lot of is when I go to a post website, it's hard to really pull out, you know, the IGE stuff clearly comes top of the page. It's always well identified, but sometimes it's hard to drill down beyond scholarships, seeing what posts are doing with student engagement. We don't have a lot of posts that have student chapter pages on their post sites. So it's, you know, that would be another level of getting assistance in reflecting what posts are doing, is if we can get student activities and student chapter activities represented on post websites. I think it would help us know what's out there and how to point students to these posts.
Sounds like a good idea. I'm going to go check my website right now and see if I've got it.
And honestly, those are the kind of things too, that as a group, you know, at some point it would be great to have this community come again, but have it be more of a technical assistance type conversation where we have a checklist of, you know, here are best practices we think every post should be striving towards within your own capacity. You know, a student chapter website would, for example, would be on that list. So I want us to start thinking about who the best people are within college outreach to provide that kind of message, and then let's get a webinar together and communicate that out to the field. I think that's what I'm saying. It's chicken and the egg. There's just a lot of communications we haven't been doing that we need to before we can expect people to respond back to us.
Okay.
All right.
So, Eddie, why don't we move forward to the next slide, since we're already 30 minutes into this and we haven't left the virtual student chapter first page. So yeah, so I've already mentioned the most recent webinar that we had, which was on returning to school. And then as Eddie mentioned, we've got a briefer on deck to brief the new Space Force concept. So that's our next one, but we're, you know, actively looking for ideas on future webinar topics, what students might be interested in. And you know, we're throwing around the idea of doing a student survey, and I know how wonderfully we get responses to surveys at times. So we want to make sure it's an effective survey that we can actually get some answers on. But if there's any thoughts or ideas on topics or survey questions out there, you know, chime in, please.
Yeah,
especially
this is Terry Watkins. Yeah, one of the topics I think will be interesting, you know, we started doing it here. We're trying to do it here in UTSA in San Antonio, but resume writing virtual chapter meeting, I think would be helpful, especially for those transitioning out of college and senior year.
Okay. So are you talking about more of like a technical resume writing, you know, like getting into the very basics of how to do it? So like maybe we get somebody that's more on the professional development side to come in and brief?
Yeah, I think you need to have somebody who's more on the, you know, the HR PD side
HR.
that can, yeah, who can really, you know, kind of say, this is what we're looking for in a resume. This is the things that we are going to want to see, you know, show me your experience in other organizations while you're in college rather than just your GPA. You know, what are you know, that will, you know, give them the sense of the types of things they should be, you know, including in the resume. And honestly, it'd be good to do it for your, you know, students before they get to the senior year so that they know the things they should be trying to achieve during their college other than just attending classes.
Okay, yeah, so sure, not just how to write it then, but content as well and what they should be looking to add to their list of activities and things to get ready for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems then an extension of that would then be interviewing as well. And, you know, I'm thinking within our membership, we probably have a lot of folks that hire that we could recruit to do a interviewing 101 kind of presentation.
Okay, so there any thoughts on whether a survey would be beneficial, or if so, what questions? Otherwise, you know, we'll be coming up with one here in the near future and sending it out. And if you don't want to chime in now or put something on the chat, you know, feel free to contact me separately with any ideas and thoughts you might have.
I think this is Rick Galloway. I think a survey would be good in a way, but I think it would also be good if we can get some of the student chapter members to actually, you know, participate in that survey more forcefully. For instance, one of the ones I know, Michelle Torres had one of my neighbor's sons as an intern this summer, and he has questions now going into his junior year in college of, okay, so if this company only does this, how do I interview going forward, and what do I look at for what the companies do that are maybe more interesting to me than I've heard before? If that makes sense.
So sorry, go ahead, Eddie.
I wasn't following. Yeah, I'm going to need you. Can you re-explain that?
Yeah, for instance, we have a UTSA student chapter member that participated in intern. I mean, he was between his sophomore and junior year. He goes, but I'm looking at going in this way in civil engineering versus this way, but an intern here, how do I find out more about what the actual work opportunities are and where I want to focus going forward? And so I think one of the things we may be missing is talking about that. You know, I'm the mentor for the University of Texas at Austin here for that chapter, but one of the things that came up was with the Army's Futures Command being headquartered here in Austin. They're wanting to find out where are they going, not where we companies are going, but where is that client going in the future, which I might can gear my future work to lend toward what I want to do tied to where they're going.
Okay, I'm actually going to put that back up in the webinar topics discussion to talk about, you know, where we would have presentations on industry trends that would include private sector, military. You're saying it's having us convey what each of these parts of sectors of our industry are looking at so that they can make decisions about their futures.
Correct. And like, what do they need to add on to their core curriculum going forward in the future as students right now to look for what's out there in the future, you know, with the artificial intelligence stuff that's going on, other things that are out there versus traditional, like a bunch of us old guys came out of the civil engineering side. Okay. It's quite different right now.
Well, and it's interesting you phrase it that way, because on Thursday's discussion, we're going to be talking about competitions. And one of the arguments I've been making on wanting our chapters to get engaged in more industry-based competitions is that some of our students likely know of where these industries are headed because of research they have access to. So there might even be a flip where they represent knowledge that hasn't gone up to the private sector yet. That would be an interesting marriage of, you know, a resource a sustaining member could get from student members is accessing some of that research.
Good point. Good point. I mean, I use an example right now. I guess it's the competition that's going on. I think it's this week and next week in the Air Force between the AI group facing off against the F-35 pilot. So it's the AI versus him virtually flying the aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that stuff just resonates with these younger crowd, you know.
Well, you know, and thinking big picture, you know, I have designs to have at Jettie, especially if we can pull it off, a student lounge where we would have maybe rotating group of hosts, like a camp host, if you've ever been to a campground, that would be there to help really provide a space for these kinds of discussions. You know, it could be unstructured, it could be structured, but the point is that we would create a focal point to host students at our technical conferences where they can hear these presentations and have somebody they can come back to and download with to get some of that in the moment.
Good point.
We've also,
good point.
Yeah, we've also talked about when we get to a point where we have a competition, one of the things we want to focus on is marketability. You know, the two parameters that we had talked about prioritizing would be, is it technically realistic and is it marketable? Because we want our students to be thinking about the business side of what it takes to be in our industry, not just the you know, technical knowledge and skills. So there's definitely a lot that can be done there as far as webinar topics. I think all of that would be viewed as a resource that students would want to come to us for.
And some of these ideas, Eddie, the reason I was bringing them up is when we had the last meeting we had with the student chapter at UT Austin, this is what they brought forward. They were asking for.
So real quick, guys, the only way that I've ever been able to, I'm sorry, this is Tiffany Castricone. I'm out of the Panama City Post. But I started as a young member at 25, and the only way that I was ever able to get like the young members and or students to show up is like free food. And so with the virtual, I'm sorry, like, I mean, I hate to be that way, but I mean, it's, you know, that's what usually works for us. And so I feel like we need to have some sort of incentive, like everybody who shows up gets a $5 gift card to Starbucks. I know that gets expensive, so maybe not that. Maybe if you attend 5 of these, or for every virtual one that you attend, you get X amount of points, and then for like once you get to X amount of points, you get a $20 gift card or something like that, where it's like kind of the equivalent of free food, because you know, they're drinking Starbucks and they're eating, you know, like, I mean, I don't know if Whataburger or McDonald's gift cards are, you know, enticing too, like, but we just have to figure out how to like get that connection that they're gonna like want to show up. Because if not, they just have so much other stuff going on, and like, you know, most of the time it's like, I'll stop for free food and hear what you have to say. Oh yes, that's wonderful. So I'm not sure how we can do that virtually, but you know, throwing a couple ideas out there for you.
Yeah, no, gift cards is an easy way to go. We've already talked about for the survey, coming up with like 4 $25 gift cards that we give away to really encourage that kind of participation. I think if we ended up with a student event at Jettie, I would build it into our budget, you know, that we do something for them there. It's not just an empty room. You know, that's all like being purposeful about what we're doing.
And I like that too, but I feel like if you're just saying, okay, we're giving away 4 gift cards, and most of the time they're like, I'm not going to get it, so I'm just not going to show up. So it's more like if we put a section down on the survey where it's like, if you give us something meaningful that goes into our slide that, you know, we're going to send you a gift card or something like that. So they like stop and make an effort into like, I don't know, writing down their thoughts on what like is really important or something like that. Like something that like gives them more of an incentive on their effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an open question to figure out what might make sense, but it would be helpful to have some incentive plan at the ready. Okay, I'm just putting a placeholder, create an incentive plan for participation.
Yeah, this is Mitchell Hubble with the Hampton Roads Post, the scholarship committee chair. So I would like to follow up on that comment. I really liked and appreciated that comment. As somebody who joined same as a student member when I was 18, I think, we do have to keep in mind that you know, it's cool for the old guys to sit around and you know, talk about all these things that we offer that are appealing to people who are, you know, 30 and older. But we really have to stop and think about what appeals to a 19-year-old and find the overlap between what appeals to us and what appeals to a 19-year-old. And I think that comment was really getting there. You know, these kids are eating ramen noodles and stuff. They're broke college kids. What appeals to broke college kids? And so I'm wondering why maybe instead of doing things that a lot of that you can find on the internet or that a lot of places do, as far as normal kind of informational stuff, you know, maybe we give some sort of a forum on negotiating salary or something that, you know, makes the kid really want to attend. Sorry, that was my very frank input.
No, I agree. And you know, when I said a student lounge, that the extension from all of that is that at some point we would have a student track at our national events that would be these kinds of presentations. Any one of them could be a webinar, you know, outside of our national events. But during a national event, we could pick one or two topics, you know, have a room reserved that's the student lounge, and then have presentations in there to get exactly at those kinds of topics. I'd love to get into a scenario where chapter mentors are sending us feedback as they're hearing it. The college outreach COI is taking it under advisement, and then the vice chair for events actions that kind of feedback at our national events. So, you know, any of those kinds of ideas, we need to be able to record it.
So a quick thought on your student lounge at the next conferences, if we ever get back to conferences, which I really hope we do. So a thought on that is for the students, when they go to sign up, and now I've run conferences before, so I'm not sure how entirely complicated this would be. But when they're signing up for it, I feel like if we put out there, like we're going to have, let's say 4 or 5 mentors and the young member mentors that are going to be in the lounge, right? Except for you kind of give them like a choice. Like you could have this student mentor who's an architect, or this student mentor who's a civil engineer, or the student mentor that, you know, kind of like give them some background, and so that they can kind of choose who they would want to start with. And then you end up, like, as a mentor, you have those people that you're supposed to just like contact, you know, or like email, or like you're responsible for. Now, I mean, I do like the lounge where like you can have somebody if they're kind of wandering in and out, but I feel like they kind of need a tether, like, and something like to be responsible. But it also gives the student a choice on, you know, I don't know if they pick somebody from Texas because they're from Texas, or they pick somebody who's a civil engineer because in the Air Force because they're a civil engineer in the Air Force, or,
right.
You know.
Well, let me tell you what the young professionals are doing for SBC, which we could easily replicate. It would take some coordination, and the missing piece for us right now is that we don't have a vice chair for events. But that's what the exact strategizing that we would lean on that person to do. But the young professionals are working with the Academy of Fellows. They're going to develop, leading up to SBC, they're going to create small cohorts of young professionals that are going to be attached to a fellow. That fellow is going to host quick video chats before SBC, just to give them a run through of what to look out for at SBC, what to have on their radar. And then during SBC, the fellow is going to send out periodic offers to gather during the conference to just check in with folks and be a resource during those events. Ours may be a little bit more structured and maybe a little more one-on-one, but the young professionals would be a great community to bring into something like this. And that gets towards this, helping them with their own professional development. A lot of that does occur at our conferences. So,
Yeah, and in person is always so much easier for this engagement, social. I'm looking at some of the stuff in the chat, and I get the social aspects, that the benefits of the student chapters, but we were talking about the virtual student chapter here first. So how do you make something virtual social, where you're going to get that benefit of the engagement between everybody that we would typically have? I mean, I was just talking about going to a conference this fall, and whether they have it or not, I don't know, but that's the thing we've all been missing from all of our conferences and meetings, right? Is that networking and social engagement that we get. So I'm really not sure. Virtual happy hours and everything like that are fine, but they're still not that. It's not the same as being in person. But just so we cover just the one last slide on the virtual student chapter, I know we still have a few others that we wanted to talk about. Is there any other ways that we can improve our reach out to folks besides email, which is what we do now? As I mentioned, we tried the Slack alternative. That didn't work. Again, it's just another platform that you have to register for, that then pushes information to you, assuming that you actually sign up to receive the information. Otherwise, you have to go out to it and actually pull the information. So that didn't seem to be that effective. We've also talked about doing a student newsletter, and we could put a lot of these different topics, information on these topics, on interview skills and things like that, in a newsletter, if we think that would actually help out folks. So any thoughts on that? Otherwise, we'll go to the next slide.
yeah, I feel like this. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Dave again. Going back to my question, or my point that I got buried in the comments here. I mean, I go back to the fact that virtual, if you can clarify for me, virtual student chapters really exist to offer an opportunity for individual students that are scattered to the wind, that are located in a school where you don't have enough people to create an actual student chapter. Is that right? I mean, am I all wet on this? I think it's important to understand what the purpose of virtual student chapter is.
Right. And that's, yes, that was the original intent of it. And as I think we were talking before, though, we've kind of expanded beyond just, because we didn't get the registration, people actually signing on to being just a virtual student chapter member. So we don't have the outreach. We've now really extended, at least the publication of the advertisements of our events to everybody. So it's now actually reaching more than just a virtual student chapter. But yes, I mean, that was absolutely what the idea was behind it, because there is, if you look at the numbers, we have over 2,000 student members in high school or college, but only 600 of them are actually assigned to a student chapter. So how do we reach those folks out there and give them what they might need to, be for professional development and insight into the engineering career field?
Well, and I just wanted people to understand. I mean, I see Christina mentions that, she's interested in a virtual chapter to augment what's offered on campus, and I get that. But in the end, if you have an actual student chapter versus and in this environment, you know, we're looking to provide opportunities that are, in a sense, virtual chapters, insofar as we're trying to not have face-to-face meetings. So, but anyway, okay, I just wanted to make sure people understood that in terms of, because I think it gets lost in the conversation between actual student chapters in the age of COVID. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no reason why the original definition or the original idea behind the virtual student chapter can't change. What we're trying to do, right? Is it becoming more of an outreach platform to all students, particularly given the virtual environment that we're operating in right now? So, maybe we need to redefine what the virtual student chapter is.
Well, or I see it in two layers. You know, right now, say a student at the San Antonio Post would be able to benefit from everything the San Antonio Post puts on, but any other student not part of that post wouldn't, versus a student that doesn't have a post at all. They don't have any base programming that they have exposure to. So the virtual student chapter becomes, and the webinars that we can come up with, becomes their base professional development. But San Antonio, a student in San Antonio can also benefit from the programming that a virtual student chapter can do. So it's almost like we're trying to provide a base for everyone, knowing that there's students that are going to get more opportunities because they're going to be physically located near a chapter or a post. The next layer then would be if two students from Notre Dame and a student from Berkeley decided to come together to host a team to do a competition. There's no post that would be readily willing to and ready to host them. The virtual student chapter could then host them as their sponsoring chapter if we needed. So it's almost a placeholder. Yep.
Have we thought about allowing the students to like pick 3 posts? And I say that because we do that with the regular members, like they could pick a post that their home is near, they could pick a post where their school is near, and and then when they do that kind of thing, like all 3 of the posts get notified.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yes, but unfortunately right now we're having to wait until we get a new database, because one of the other issues that I'm dealing with is the virtual student chapters and the posts are all in the same field in our database. So our database doesn't distinguish between a student that's part of a post and part of a chapter in 2 different fields. It adds them as 2 separate post selections, if you see what I mean. Once we can decouple those as part of their member part of being a student member, they would still get to choose 3 posts, but as part of their student side, they would get to designate the school they're in if they're part of any student chapter. So that is on the list when we migrate to a new system, is to make all the student members following the same formula that a regular member would. And that way they would get exposed to more messaging, like you're saying.
And when is that expected to roll out?
That is the $1,000 question. We have a scope. We've got a consultant working with us that's helping to solicit bids from different platforms that we would be considering. I think COVID, we were on budget to do it this year, but with COVID, all of those type of expenditures have been put on hold. We still have the consultant working, but we're likely not going to be in a position to sign any contracts until next year. So unfortunately, we're in a holding pattern, but you won't find a single staff member that isn't ready to move on from our current database because of these challenges. And that's what makes communication difficult, and why we're still not having figured out the right way of whether Slack or a newsletter or social media. I think we're still going to be challenged until we get that new database on communicating accurately. We're down to a few minutes, and I do want to get us to the last slide. We don't have to answer, have this fully answered now, but one of the other things I'd like us to start considering, and I forget who had this one, I'll turn it over to my moderators, so I'm not speaking over you.
It was supposed to be me, Eddie, Tiffany, Castricone from the Panama City Post. We were going to talk about how to transition student members to professional members. And I actually was not a student member. I didn't hear about singing until my first job out of college. So I was 24. So if I'm speaking to the students, like as a young professional on a board, like I ended up on a board, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened to my career. Like I was able to sit across the table from people who were owners of companies, who were like the people, like at the time it was 2008. It was when everybody was the economy was down. They were literally getting rid of architects like we were on fire. Like they wouldn't look at your resumes. They wouldn't talk to you. And then I ended up on a SAMI board, and I was sitting across from the people who wouldn't even talk to me or look at my resume. And I remember a couple of people going, "Why do I know your name?" And I was like, because I submitted a resume and you guys like weren't taking any interviews. And so it was like, it really helped. It was kind of amazing to be, you know, fresh out of college and be sitting across the table from somebody who like literally wouldn't even interview me. So as far as the benefit for students, that was one of those things that you could be doing. And I feel like maybe if we had a student representative on like each one of our boards, like just show up as a board member, like we have a young member that might be, you know, super prudent to all of our posts, just to hear, you know, that's what's up and coming, just like our young members help out when it comes to that. As far as I know we had a few people on here who did actually transition from student to professional, and I think I'd like to hear from you guys if you're still on. I'm not sure if I did good on the moderator. I'm not, this is my first time trying, so sorry.
That's great.
Any takers from the student who has transitioned?
Hey everybody, this is Arpan Patel. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I know you, Arpan. You're in my post. But yes, let's hear from you.
Sorry, I don't have too much to add. I've been invited here to kind of listen and see maybe if this is a potential LDP kind of service project that we can help out with. But in short, I was a student member at the academy, and then I transitioned more into SAME as I guess a young professional. And as Tiffany mentioned, I was on the board at the Panama City Post. But I think the incentives, which was mentioned, are very different for student members as opposed to actual sustaining members or older young professional members. So we really need to clarify what the student chapters and or the virtual chapter wants the students to gain out of it. Because if it's just about increasing membership, then basically we need to find something that entices the students to come in to one of these meetings. If it's about transitioning students from a student chapter to a young professional within SAME, then we need to make sure that there's a clear link between mentorship and or young professionals and or the camps to liaison them from a student chapter into, you know, working with the post levels or working into different COIs and so forth. And in short, I think that's a piece that I'm going to actually take to two other of my LDP classmates who are working on a leadership toolkit, leadership mentorship toolkit. But I guess my piece of that to take out of these next few days from this forum is if you guys can determine as a student chapter or student virtual chapter COI what we want the students to get, we can take that and build out that toolkit and basically provide assistance to liaison or help students from either gaining membership into the SAME national network or gaining them as from student members into professional members. So I think those are the two main points of information I taken out of this first conversation, but I look forward to tomorrow and Wednesday, or excuse me, Thursday's conversations as well.
Yeah, I think what I heard is, we need to be more purposeful about that transition, that we can't just leave it to chance. There needs to be somebody communicating value that is bringing them into those ranks. I like the idea before about having student representatives on post boards. I think anytime we can expose them to what the professional world looks like and what's ahead of, in store for them as a professional member would help. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Arpon. Any clue? We just a little over time now, and I want to be respectful of everybody's the time you committed. So any clue? I mean, these are all questions that we're going to keep grappling with as a COI. So if you want to bring your feedback to our next COI meeting, feel free to have these be ongoing agenda items that you can bring up. Otherwise, we've got 2 more sessions tomorrow, one tomorrow on student chapter post relations, and then Wednesday on competitions. So feel free to come back the next 2 days as well. Any other comments folks want to give before we close? Well, I really appreciate everyone's input. This, I know an hour wasn't a lot of time. Like I said, it would have been a lot more productive, I guess, if we had been able to meet longer in person. But I love the amount of participation we got and the kind of feedback that we've already collected. So thanks, everyone. And we will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Thank you, Eddie.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, all.